I actually leave clues as to what's coming up in this channel in the comment sections below. So if you're keen, look for them. And this is a shout out to Vincent. I actually left this teaser, it got it correct. Is Crowdstrike the best cybersecurity firm to own right now? Before we get to that answer, let me explain a bit on the history of things. Cybersecurity was first started in 1980s, and back then it was a lot of antivirus. The whole idea about antivirus is like an army that you put in front of your gate, your camp, to protect yourself against intruders, correct? And today we'll be touching on Crowdstrike, which is a fantastic player in this space. Now, Mcafee has been a pioneer since all these years. You may have installed it in your PC or your office desktop, and you may be thinking that Mcafee is still the best player in the market, but today I'll explain to you how Crowdstrike is really kicking their butt in a lot of ways, and Crowdstrike is fast catching up in terms of revenues. And before we get further, let me invite you to smash a like early because you do know that I have quite a lot of interesting information that you can benefit on. With that, let's roll in the intro video. Hi guys, welcome back. Crowdstrike is a fairly young firm and only IPO'd in 2019. And back then, I heard a story about what their founders actually mentioned. They actually mentioned that they actually sketched on a napkin the idea of Crowdstrike disrupting stagnant endpoint security players. And they made a bet that endpoint protection needed intelligence, which is AI, to better help identify against penetrators and attacks. And the whole idea about Crowdstrike was to become cloud native, and that's how they intended to disrupt the industry. And by being on the cloud, Crowdstrike's artificial intelligence could detect an attack from US, for example, and learn from it instantly, and actually use that information to protect another computer, say in Canada. So what that means is it actually has a network effect. The more customers they bring onto the network, the more threats they are experiencing, and the more things they can learn from and share with their overall network. So it's a bit like Facebook, you have that network effect. More people on board means more chances to create a more foolproof solution for everybody that everybody can adopt. So if I put out a quick summary between Crowdstrike and Mcafee, you can realize the key differences. Firstly, in terms of detection, Crowdstrike employs machine-based learning, whereas Mcafee is still signature-based, only known threats. In terms of delivery, Crowdstrike is cloud-based. In terms of installation, in terms of number of sensors, Crowdstrike is just minutes and only requiring one sensor, whereas a traditional player like Mcafee requires multi-day installation and multiple sensors. And last but not least, Crowdstrike has event-based protections. But Mcafee is not the only competitor that Crowdstrike has. This whole cybersecurity landscape is huge. There are many kinds of cybersecurity points needed, and Crowdstrike's focus is actually on endpoint security. And let me put up this summary by Cyberscape. What do you realize? Crowdstrike is present mainly in endpoint security and also has a bit of network and infrastructure security. So the first competitor that you should know of is actually SentinelOne, which is also in the endpoint security. If you look around, they have a very similar competing product that they are going to the market with. Mcafee is actually in yellow. So Mcafee actually seems to be present in many niches of cybersecurity. The green one is Palo Alto, which also has a lot of services across different cybersecurity domains. And last but not least, you'll see names such as Palantir in black, and in brown, which is FireEye. And the reason I brought up FireEye is because of this incident. FireEye was actually a solution employed by SolarWinds, which has contracts with governments and many multinational companies. And when there was an attack being named Sunburst, FireEye was being hacked. So this hack actually caused a compromise to their entire network, which includes not just the government agencies, but companies such as MasterCard, such as PwC. So more than 18,000 companies were affected by this whole Sunburst attack. And even when I do business for cybersecurity insurance right now, I do see questions like this. Do you run a version of SolarWinds Orion that is vulnerable to Sunburst or Supernova backdoors? These kind of questions are actually asked by cybersecurity insurance firms. So what happened next? SolarWinds actually changed providers from FireEye all the way to Crowdstrike. This is my interpretation of Crowdstrike's solution. Imagine again, you have an army in front of your camp gate protecting the camp itself. Most software actually uses the army only at the front gate, but Crowdstrike actually not only has men deployed at the gate itself, they also have men prowling the middle that protects it even if it's breached. So even if hackers were to break the first wall, the zero trust feature by Crowdstrike actually prevent hackers from causing further damage in the system itself. And that's because they have actually multiple barriers internally. And with that, let me explain 3 points as to what I appreciate the most about Crowdstrike's business. The first is that Crowdstrike seems to have product market leadership. Now, if you look at this chart over here, you realize that Crowdstrike serves 61 of Fortune's 100 biggest companies. But when they IPO'd, that number was only 44, which means more and more of the biggest firms in the world are actually adopting Crowdstrike's solution. As of now, 13 of the top 20 banks employ Crowdstrike solution, but at the time of IPO 2 years ago, only 9 of them. So the numbers have been growing considerably, correct? And if you look in terms of total subscription, this number has been growing very steadily. The latest is an 82% year-on-year growth. Not only that, customers are being retained at a very high rate of 98%. And if you look at the rate graph over there, you realize that net retention is more than 120%, which means customers are retained and spending more. So how is it actually done? Crowdstrike has multiple solutions, correct? And they are able to cross-sell more and more cybersecurity solutions to their customers. And this graph actually shows that the percentage of customers with multiple cloud module subscriptions have been climbing steadily. More proof of Crowdstrike's product market leadership can be seen in Morgan Stanley's research. Crowdstrike was voted as the solution that was most likely deployed as primary endpoint protection by many firms being in the survey. To me, that simply means that it's proof that Crowdstrike solution is the best in the market right now, because you vote simply with your dollar. Now imagine this, if you are a cybersecurity director in this firm and you get headhunted to another firm subsequently for a new job, would you want to implement the best solution market? Or if you have tried before Crowdstrike, you naturally recommend your new firm to adopt Crowdstrike, correct? And that's how I believe having a superior product leads them to open the market very naturally, as key decision makers hop around and bring word of mouth to the solution itself. The second part I really like about Crowdstrike's business is that it's highly scalable. Crowdstrike right now has ironed out 2 key partnerships in my opinion. The first is actually a partnership with Google's cloud. Now Google's cloud is actually more than 930,000 customers. And imagine if Crowdstrike is able to cross-sell through the whole Google cloud, it means that customers with a click of a button can just simply subscribe to the Crowdstrike services. And there's no real need for a salesman in between the process itself. And not only that, Crowdstrike is actually ironing out something with AWS, the biggest cloud provider in the market. I found that they were key sponsor of AWS, and that actually signaled that this partnership with AWS is in fruition, and that sooner or later they'll also be able to implement to AWS's customers Crowdstrike's cloud security solutions. AWS and Google Cloud will definitely be 2 funnels whereby Crowdstrike will be able to bring in more subscriptions down the years. Point number 3 that I actually love about Crowdstrike's business is that it's highly recurring in terms of its revenue. Take a look at this chart over here. You realize that subscription revenue is the bulk of things, correct? Which means once a customer comes on board, they use it for multi-years ahead. That's actually very similar to what iFast's business model is. Customer comes in, every year there's actually a recurring revenue that can derive as long as the customer stays with you. And the latest figure for first quarter 2021 is 70% subscription growth year on year. All in all, it's quite obvious that I'm quite bullish about this whole business itself. And before we get to the conclusions, let me invite you to smash on subscribe, because we'll be launching videos every week to help you in your financial journey. Now I'll try to give you a balanced point of view, and the most obvious thing to be optimistic is that cloud security's business is expected to grow very aggressively, correct? Because more businesses are moving towards cloud. And having a cloud security is just a natural thing to do for any business that wants to protect itself better. The compounded annual growth rate of cloud security is 25.5%. So the tailwinds are strong, which means as long as Crowdstrike is a market leader, you should expect growth rates to be at least above 25.5%. Not only that, Crowdstrike seems to be signaling that they are expanding their addressable market simply by adding more modules of security. In 2019, they estimated the addressable market to be 25 billion, but as of 2023, they are projecting it to double to about $44 billion. But what are negatives, you may be asking? The first thing I'd like to present to you is this part on valuation. Take a look firstly on Mcafee. You realize that revenues are growing, correct? Albeit at a much slower pace. Mcafee's revenues latest is at $2.9 billion, and the growth rate is at a lukewarm 11% growth. The market cap for Mcafee is only $12 billion. What about Palo Alto? The revenues for 2020 were at $3.41 billion. The growth rate for revenues were at 18%. Palo Alto's market cap is at $38 billion. All of these firms are still loss-making, which means they are rapidly trying to do R&D and grow market share. What about for Crowdstrike? You realize that its revenue for 2020 was only at $481 million, a very small fraction of these 2 big players, correct? But the growth rate is a much faster pace at 90+%. But Crowdstrike's market cap right now is at $58 billion with its share price at about $260. The question is it a fair price to pay? Because after all, they still need at least 5 years to reach what Mcafee and Palo Alto is in terms of the revenue, even at current aggressive growth rate. My gut feeling is that Crowdstrike, even though it's an owner of a fantastic product and a well-run business, is likely expensive as of right now, especially when you compare it against its 2 closest peers. Palo Alto, for one, has a revenue size that's 7 times that of Crowdstrike, and yet costs about half the price. So I'm not too sure if Crowdstrike is worth it, but what do I know? Maybe it's always better to pick the industry leader, because that will reward shareholders over time as they disrupt and eventually conquer the whole market. So if you know cybersecurity a bit more, leave your thoughts and comments section below. I'll be keen to hear from you. And with that, let me introduce you to a previous high growth company I've featured before on this channel, C Limited. If you're keen to invest in a high growth company, C Limited is also clocking more than 70% in terms of revenue growth. C Limited is expanding globally and has a fantastic growth story to it also. With that, I'll sign off from here and also see you in that tutorial. Take care and goodbye.